What does a worst case scenario look like for the Green Bay Packers in the NFL draft? And what about a best case? We dig in on today's show.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Bet Online. Go over there and see everything that they have to offer. They are your number one spot for all of your gambling needs this year. Baseball season about to get here. The NBA playoffs about to be here. Bet Online, where the game starts. I got this great question on Twitter about a worst case scenario. And my initial reaction, and I'm going to broad stroke it first, and then we're going to get into some scenarios. My initial reaction was, there's no such thing, because the Packers are in such a position with 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks that almost nothing that could happen would turn out in a bad way for them, because they have 4 premium selections. And so this is the kind of draft where, okay, let's say the quarterbacks don't go. You know, it's a bad quarterback class. Let's say they don't go. And now you're pushing up position players. Now tackles are going, receivers are going, edge players are going, guys that the Packers might be interested in drafting. They're going. That is the scenario that you're guarding against, right? And I think receiver is the one that everyone's going, okay, make sure that these guys are not going off the board before 22, 28, etc. Now, the good news for Green Bay is I think the consensus around some of these players is off. I think Christian Watson, as a top 40 player, I have no problem with him going late first. So if he's the best receiver that you can get and there's not another quality player there, I have no problem with Green Bay, given what someone like Christian Watson could do for this offense. I have no problem with them, quote unquote, reaching for that guy. There are edge players who could come in and contribute right away, play 30%, 40% of snaps, and eventually in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you Preston Smith, transitions to a secondary role if he stays on the team, or you move on from him given the way that his contract is structured, and you have your edge 2. Even if he's just an edge 3 in year 1 or year 2, that is a really valuable player. Maybe they select a Travis Jones, someone who I think is going way too low in mocks. I think he's going to end up going much higher. I think the fact that this is a weak interior defensive lineman draft means his stock is going to be pushed up. I would be surprised if he would not a top 50 pick. But as this exercise, I think, shows, it's difficult for everyone to be gone. There's always going to be some appealing options. Now, whether they're appealing to Green Bay is going to be a separate question. And I think that is why when I was able to actually sit down, put together a mock, take the players, and go, okay, what if they're left with only XYZ types? What if they're only left with XYZ positions? Then you start to go in and you go, okay, well, that wouldn't be optimal. It wouldn't be the best. And we're gonna talk about the best a little bit later. I wanted to start with the doomsday scenarios because that was the question that I got. And I will go, as we get closer to the draft, I will go through what I think a perfect draft looks like. We're not there yet. I still have a ton of tape to try and churn through over the next 3-4 weeks. We are going to be doing a live show in Dallas on the Locked On Podcast Network. that I will be hosting. It won't be a Packers show, but it will be an NFL draft show. I hope that you will consider watching us, or at the very least, second screening us. That will be the best place to get my instant reaction. And then after the first round is over, for example, we will go live and we will react to what may be 2 first-round picks. We'll see if it's actually 2, or if Green Bay trades one, or if they trade and get another one. Who knows what could happen? A lot could happen between now and then, as Matt LaFleur and Mark Murphy keep insisting to us that a lot can happen. So let's look at some scenarios. You go and I pulled this up. This was the best available according to the Draft Network's board at 22. And remember, I did this intentionally. I picked for everyone, and I tried to stay as true to, okay, this is a realistic scenario. It fits a need, or it fits a type, or it fits a position, or whatever it is. And it fits about where this player is going to go. I'm not reaching for crazy stuff to try and make this, extra difficult for Green Bay. So if at 22, let's say the quarterbacks don't go. I don't think this is going to happen, but let's just say. That leaves Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett at the top of the draft. Trent McDuffie's a corner from Washington. Could be someone that Green Bay is interested in, but their secondary is in a really good spot. Tyler Linderbaum from Iowa. He's got short arms, but he's athletic enough. A center. I just don't think after getting Josh Myers, you would consider that at 22, but maybe I don't love the positional value. I think that's part of the worst case scenario part of this year. Kenyon Green, not a Packers type. Don't think they would do that. Devin Lloyd is an off-ball linebacker. I don't see it in the first. Now, maybe on day 3, you get a special teams kind of player, someone who you think can compete with Chris Barnes to be that secondary linebacker kind of player. That would make sense. In the first round, as good as Devin Lloyd is, as talented as he is, and I do think he's talented, I just don't know if that makes sense positional value-wise for Green Bay in a defense where you're probably not going to play 2 linebackers more than 30% of the time. At least that's how you would prefer to play. Now, if you think he can stay on the field, that is, something that I guess I would understand if you wanted to play that way, given that they don't have a third safety. I don't love it. Jahan Dotson is the best receiver on the board here. Now, not for me, not for my board, because Christian Watson and George Pickens were still on the board here. And so this is what I'm saying. I tried to do everything I can in my power to make this as difficult as possible for the Packers. And sitting there at 22 are 2 guys that I would take in the top 40, no problem. Absolutely no problem with George Pickens. I think he's a late first, and I think Christian Watson is a late first, early second. So at 22, is it a reach? Kinda, but not really. There's some other edge players here: David Ojabo, Boye Mafe, Arnold Ebikate, and a bunch of linebackers. I don't think the linebackers, and some safeties: Daxton Hill, Lewis Seen, some guys that I think could actually be in play in the first round, depending on how this all shakes out. And so I picked Arnold Ebikate, the pass rusher. I think part of this is positional value. If you want a pass rusher, you take him in the first round. Green Bay is going to need a pass rusher this year, and they're going to need a probably bona fide, second guy next to Rashawn Gary in a year or 2. Plus, it gives you a little bit of negotiation leverage with Rashawn Gary, so you're not having to pay top of market if you don't want to. Gives you a little bit of insurance there. I think Green Bay will end up paying Rashawn Gary, but that's something that you build in here. Again, if you want an edge, he's got to go in the first round. That would be my thought on this, or you go day 3 developmental type. But you got to get him early. And so I think if this were the scenario and you could get Ebikate, Pickens, or Watson, Ojabo, Ojabo, if not for the injury, and it's a bad one, the torn Achilles, he'd probably be a top 15 pick, maybe a top 10 pick. And so if you think he's going to be, 30% of snaps guy by December, and probably not. He probably will not play. You're probably losing your rookie season. That's tough to go at 22, but maybe at 28. At 28, you stash him. That makes some sense, I think, for me. So I like I said, I took Ebiketie just in this mock scenario. And then just to make this more difficult, I took Pickens and Watson off the board at 28. So let's just say the receiver market goes crazy. Well, then I was able to grab Lewis Cine, the safety from Georgia. They need someone like Lewis Cine. So that's the thing. They need someone like both of these guys that I picked. They need a guy like that. They need a third safety. Adrian Amos might not be on this team. We talked about this last week, you guys. That the safety is the secret needy position. And so they walk away with a guy at a need position, really. Someone who could come in right away and play snaps for them. Someone who's going to be a killer on special teams right away for them. And could be a long-term starter, whether they, gives them a little Darnell Savage insurance. It allows them to say, Adrian Amos, it was great. Thank you so much for your contributions. We'll see later. If you're someone that is in the long-term plans for the Packers, and he's really talented. He's a legit first-round talent. So that's great. In the second round, there just weren't any receivers worth taking at 53. So I got Quay Walker, the linebacker from Georgia. We got another Georgia player. He can run. Apparently, he is in the discussion for the first linebacker off the board, although I think that probably doesn't happen until the mid-20s anyway. So, look, he's really talented. He could come in and be your second linebacker, maybe play 40% of snaps, core special teams player. Maybe you have some packages for him. I think as a blitzer, he could be really useful. You're making your team better. Now, this is all defense. That was sort of how I set this up. But your defense is going to be loaded. And so, okay, maybe your receiver position is not great, but you can go on and you can get somebody. You can, Julio Jones. We're going to talk about Julio at the end of the show. You can go out and get someone. Will Fuller. There are veterans available who can go out and make your team better. And look, they're still your second round pick. They're still your third round pick. And you're probably going to be a team that Aaron Rodgers has to elevate some receivers anyway. So if you're only allowing 15 points a game, 16 points a game, Aaron Rodgers can't score 20 points a game. Now they're probably not, that defense is not going to be that good, but let's say they allow 20 points a game. That's reasonable, 20 points. Rodgers can't get to 24 points a game, 23 points a game with Allen Lazard, Randall Cobb, Big Bob Tunyon, and insert third round draft pick here, Jalen Tolbert. Now, I could have taken Jalen Tolbert with my second round pick in this mock. I took Travis Jones just to create some chaos, but Tolbert, let's just say, I think that is the biggest fear for a lot of Packer fans is someone like Jalen Tolbert is the best receiver Green Bay is in a position to draft, or is just the receiver Green Bay drafts. By the way, Jalen Tolbert's good. He's a good football player. Is he flashy? Is he special? No. Is he good? Is he a receiver one? No. Is he a good player? Yeah. He is. He's a good football player. And that's what you need. That's what you need. It's a good pick if the guy is a good football player. And that's a good football player. All right, we're going to talk about best case scenarios coming up right after this. Our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I started taking Athletic Greens because I'm bad at vitamins. I have an alarm on my phone to take them, and I actually still have the alarm even though I've been taking AG1. And I sort of smile every time my alarm goes off because I'm like, no, I already did that. I already did the good thing for my body. It's not just the vitamins, though. It is trying to get my stomach, after 2 years in this morass, your eating habits wane a little bit. Your drinking habits might amplify a little bit. And my stomach is not as great as I would like it to be. Not as healthy as I would like it to be. But AG1 helps with all of that. Whole Force superfoods, probiotics, adaptogens, and 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, and a lot more to keep your body feeling its best. No GMOs, no nasty chemicals, artificial anything, while still tasting pretty good, I have to say. It's green, and it tastes kind of like green, but in a good way, like a green juice. You've had a green juice. Come on, it's 2022. You've had a green juice. And I would recommend it, and I have recommended. I took it on vacation with me. This is becoming my go-to way to endorse something is I took it on vacation with me. I took it on vacation with me because I was feeling so good while I was taking it. And to make it easy for you to check it out, Athletic Greens is giving you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. I took those on vacation with me. Did I tell you I took them on vacation with me? All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NFL network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NFL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at Bet Online, your number one sports source for all your betting needs and info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Master Championship odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. Bet Online is your continued source for all of your sports wagering info, including live betting, esports, and scores. Head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet Online, where the game starts. Okay, so a ideal scenario. Now we're still, I don't want to say we're early in the process because we're not, but I think there's going to be movement here over the next couple of weeks. And like Drake London works out tomorrow. There's going to be a lot of eyes on that Drake London workout. If he runs 4.5 flat and jumps 40 inches and has a solid 3-cone, he might go top 10. And that's going to push other players down. It could push other receivers down. Drake London is certainly someone I have my eye on for Green Bay. I think he fits a lot of what they're looking for. And he is, when I look at best case scenarios, Drake London at 22 is my best case scenario. Because of all the guys that I think are alpha number ones, and there's 4 guys in this class that I think can be true alpha number ones, he is the guy I am most confident in because I know the athletic ability is there. Now, I know that Treylon Burks didn't test as great as the athletic ability, but this is a guy who hit 21.9, I think it was, miles per hour on the field on the next gen tracking. It would have been like the 4th or 5th fastest time in the NFL last year. It would have been tied for Tyreek Hill's fastest time in 2020. This guy can move. Now, is he a true deep threat? No. Is he ready to come in right away and fit in this offense? I think so, but I think Drake London is a better route runner right now, and I think the potential for him, I mean, he could be DeAndre Hopkins. That's what I think that you're looking at for the ceiling of Drake London, still only 20 years old. It's ideal. We're going to talk about the trade scenarios in a second, but it is ideal. So let's say you get Drake London. Then what? Do you get a second receiver? Is that the ideal? I don't think so. I think what you can do is if you get someone like London or Burks early at 22, let's say, and I think either of them are worth the 22nd pick, you can wait and find your speed in the 2nd or the 3rd. You can get Khalil Shakur. You can get a George Pickens. You can get some of these Alec Pierce, these vertical threats who are mostly just vertical threats. You can get those guys a little bit later, and you don't have to go at 28 and reach for a George Pickens or a Christian Watson because you have Drake London. And Drake London in this offense could be a star. I think in any offense, but with Aaron Rodgers, with the ball placement, he could be a star. So then at 28, I think that's when it becomes worth the risk with someone like David Ojabo. Because like I said, top 10, top 15 type talent if he doesn't have the injury. And so you're saying, look, we can't use him this year anyway. Now he actually can't give you the 30% of snaps that you probably need. You probably bring back Whitney Merciless, which you may or may not have wanted to do anyway. And in a year or two, you might have a superstar. That's why I love the value here. If you're going to take an edge, take them early. And then in the 2nd round, George Pickens falls to 53, let's say. I love that. To walk away from this draft with 2 of the guys that I think could be alpha number ones. And I do think Pickens could be a day 2 kind of player. And I wouldn't be surprised if he was in the 1st, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he's sitting there at 58, at 60, at 62. just because the injuries and the lack of productivity after his freshman season. I think the talent is there. Friend of the show, Jacob Morley, thinks he's the number one receiver in the class. Green Bay Packers draft guide, he's right at the top. You should go get that. You should go order it now. Get all the info that you need for this draft stuff. And so if you can get George Pickens and Travis Jones on day 2, Travis Jones was a worst case scenario guy, but I loved it. I loved it. I don't love that first draft just because you didn't get a receiver, but that's 4 really good players. This is 4 really good players, all of whom could be potential stars. And when you're looking at, ideal scenario drafts, that's what you're looking at. Now, how does this change if they're able to pull off a trade for one of these current stars like DK Metcalf? In a perfect world, you'd like it to be 28, the pick that you trade. You probably have to give up 22 just to be competitive, because if DK Metcalf is in fact available via trade, and the reporting from Jeremy Fowler is, despite the team publicly saying we're not trading him or don't intend to trade him, they said they did not intend to trade Russell Wilson as well, then for the right price, he could be had. Now, there's always a right price, or almost always a right price. There's probably not a right price for Patrick Mahomes. A team probably could not give enough to convince the Chiefs to give up Patrick Mahomes, to convince the Bills to give up Josh Allen. There just isn't a price. For the Chargers to give up Justin Herbert, there's no price. But for most players, there is. A first and a third. The almost Devontae Adams trade. I think that now you're getting into the realms where you can make this work. You're still going to have to give him the contract. But that changes a lot about how you feel about this draft. Now, you probably still felt like, well, it'd be nice to get another receiver, and it would be, but now you don't have to prioritize it the same way. If you have DK Metcalf and Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb and Big Bob Tunyon and Amari Rodgers, receiver is still, I would say in the top 3 of your potential needs. But if there's an edge player that you really like at 28, let's say, you could grab him. If you could get DK Metcalf at 22 and keep the rest of the draft that I had the same, Ajabo, Pickens, and Jones, home run. Absolute home run. If you just replace Drake London with DK Metcalf, let's go. And I think you could make the case that, if you got DK, that maybe you want a different kind of receiver, but you can never have too many big, tall, fast guys. George Pickens is 6'3", 195 and runs 4.4. He's a big play waiting to happen. He could be your field stretcher day 1 while DK does the everythings for your offense. And then you still have Allen Lazard, a.k.a. the Goon. You still have Randall Cobb in the slot. You have Amari Rodgers. You have Aaron Jones, who I think there's more there as a split back, someone who you can split out and let him work against linebackers and safeties. A.J. Dillon, I think there's more work you can get there. And then, you have the flexibility to get one of this is a good middle rounds tight end class. Round 3, round 4, round 5. The Jelani Woods, the Jeremy Ruckerts, the Cade Ottons. There are some guys in the middle rounds that I think Green Bay is going to have plenty of interest in. And I think that they make a lot of sense here. You bring in a pass catcher along with DK. That's probably enough. But if you get out another receiver plus a pass rusher and some defensive line depth, hey, now you're really in a good position to go compete for a Super Bowl. Green Bay is already, if not the favorite, and they're probably not. They're probably in that second tier just behind the Rams and the Bucs, but those two teams got worse too. I think if the Packers traded for DK Metcalf, they become the favorite. In the NFC, certainly. And they're trying to take a swing. So let's see if they're able to actually do it. Let's finish up here in just a little bit. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Built Bar is the best tasting protein bar ever. It's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. The protein puff flavors, they're unbelievable. It's protein infused marshmallow. Did you hear what I said? Protein infused marshmallow. The churro flavor is out of this world. I'm a big fan of the coconut marshmallow, and they're unlike any protein you've ever eaten because the puff with the chocolate, it makes them so smooth, so easy to chew. Whereas a lot of protein bars are just, they're so gristly and chalky, and it's like chewing on concrete. This is not enjoyable for me. Well, Built Bar is different. And yet, they're low in calorie, high in fiber, high in protein, low in net carbs. Don't know how they do it. Don't know how they do it because the nutritional value is there, and yet they taste like a candy bar. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. One quick note on the veteran receiver market. Devontae Parker traded over the weekend for basically nothing. A future third, which is really a fourth, but it was the fourth with a pick swap for the fifth. So the Patriots gave up very little to get Devontae Parker. I think that tells us everything we need to know about how the Dolphins feel about Devontae Parker. I think it was a worthy swing by the Patriots. It does impact, I think, the likelihood that the Patriots take a receiver, which is good for Green Bay. And there are still other guys out there. The Will Fullers, the Julio Joneses. Julio is, according to reports, not looking for some sort of monster deal. He understands that he's not going to get some $10, $15 million per year deal this year. He apparently wants to play for a contender, and Ian Rappaport, unprompted, suggested the Packers as a potential landing spot. Played last year in Tennessee, and running a similar kind of offense. It wasn't Arthur Smith or Matt LaFleur's offense exactly. Todd Downing did not run it in a faithful kind of way, but some similar concepts. And remember, Julio Jones ran this offense with Kyle Shanahan and Matt LaFleur in Atlanta. So it's something that he is certainly plenty familiar with. And I still think that is something that the Packers have on the back burner. Jason Hirschhorn wrote for the Leap newsletter, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, last week, that the Packers are showing patience on this veteran receiver thing and that's the right way to go. I completely agree. It doesn't seem like these guys are flying off the shelves. There is no supply chain issues with these receivers. They're here, and the demand is just not there right now. I think people really like this draft class, and I think once the draft class happens, there will be a crush of teams trying to get them because they didn't get the receiver that they wanted. And I think, the Packers are going to be on speed dial for these agents, because if the Packers don't get their guy, or even if they do, you call the Green Bay first. Hey, what's the deal? Do you need a vet? If not, we're going to move on. I think Green Bay has told these guys, hey, just be patient. And if you're patient with us, we will give you a fair shake later to catch passes from Aaron Rodgers and go compete for a Super Bowl. It's about as compelling a case as these guys are going to get. A lot more to come this week. We've got Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, formerly of Locked On NFL Draft podcast. He's going to be on the show this week to talk draft, all things draft. I love doing shows based on questions from you guys, so send them to me on Twitter at Peter_Bukowski or at the podcast at Locked On Packers. You could also send them in an iTunes review, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers. And you could send them on the Locked On Packers fan hotline. Send me a text, leave me a voicemail, 920-341-3775 to stay Locked On Packers.